Hello, and welcome to another episode from Season 6 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season we're changing things up. We're devoting a whole season to reviewing Esquire's list of the 50 scariest movies of all time. In each episode, we'll break down a different movie, talk about how scary it really was, and then update our rankings to prove how much smarter we are than the other people on the internet. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the conversation. I've done a good deal of complaining about this list.
Yeah.
This week may be the first time I don't have a lot of trash to talk.
Yeah, man, I think this would be... I know we said this a couple episodes ago, but I feel like I'm hoping that this is turning, like we're turning the corner.
Yeah.
On the list.
We're finally getting through like the ones that had to be tacked on the end to make it an even 50.
Yeah, exactly. We're sticking it out, man.
Yeah.
We're doing good.
Yeah, so this season we're going through Esquire's list of the 50 scariest movies of all time, and to be honest, we've had a lot of misses thus far. A lot of movies that were both not scary and not good. But this week we watched When a Stranger Calls, the original 1979 version. And aside from being really, really difficult to find a place to watch it online, It was a generally pleasant experience.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you hadn't have found it on YouTube, then we would have had to skip this week because I wasn't fixing to buy a movie on this list.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Given the quality so far.
I mean, I couldn't even find it digitally to buy.
Oh, same. Yeah.
I had to... We couldn't find it to buy or rent. Like, it's on YouTube for free right now.
Yeah.
I don't know how long that'll be, but...
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess my knowledge of this movie was entirely from previews of the 2006 one. And because I never saw that movie, but I remember it being like really heavily advertised, and the calls are coming from inside the house achieved almost that like Snape kills Dumbledore level of permeation in society. And to be honest, I really just was expecting Hush without the deafness.
Yeah, I was too.
Like I thought the movie was going to be just her in the house getting tormented, like one continuous sequence, but that was really only a very small part of the movie. So, had you seen this one before?
Nope, I haven't. I've seen bits and pieces. Okay. I haven't seen the whole thing together.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I'm going to introduce it, and then we will talk all about it.
Sounds good.
In 1979, Columbia Pictures released When a Stranger Calls. The film was directed by Fred Walton and stars Carol Kane as a babysitter who is tormented by creepy phone calls from a dangerous stalker. This is only the jumping off point, though, for a story that spans 7 years and culminates with stalking, torment, and murder. When a Stranger Calls was made on a budget of about $1.5 million and brought in over $20 million at the box office. It has spawned a made-for-TV sequel called When a Stranger Calls Back, and also a 2006 remake of the same name. This movie is hard to find for streaming, but it can actually be watched in its entirety for free on YouTube, and it's pretty good, so you're really just missing out if you don't take advantage.
Very good. I got a couple facts about this movie.
I had a feeling you might find some.
Well, first, this is just a weird coincidence that they may or may not have known what they were doing with this list. But Carol Kane, she was in the TV show Taxi, right? She was with Andy Kaufman, who was in the last movie that we
yeah, that's right. In God Told Me To.
I just thought that was kind of strange. That's not a fact about the movie. I just thought it was fun. Yeah. So this movie is obviously based off of like the urban legend, babysitter, man upstairs urban legend kind of thing. From what I could tell, this didn't spawn it, but it was like influenced by it.
So that was around before this movie,
supposedly. Yeah.
Interesting.
And also this sparked the beginning of Scream. The movie Scream is kind of the relatively same concept. That was 100% like influenced by. I'm gonna say influence in quotes because no one can see me, but
and also scary movie.
Yeah. But the thing is even though it is based off the urban legend, it's also based off of a movie that came out before it, which focused on a young woman being stalked on the phone by a psychotic murderer. That original movie was called Sorry, Wrong Number. It was in the 1940s when it came out. So the other thing I read about this is that this actually, which is kind of goes into like my feelings about the movie, but this originally started out as a short, like a 20-minute short, I think, short story, like short film or whatever, which then they blossomed into a full movie after I think Halloween came out, and they saw how successful it was.
Oh.
They decided to kind of turn this into something more.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Because the structure of the movie, to me, had like very, very clearly three pretty distinct parts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering if that first part was what was originally the short film, and then they added the additional ones later.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if that was like the exact,
Yeah, they may have made some changes for like the longer. Yeah.
But from what I understand, the opening 20 minutes was its own thing at one time.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that would make total sense.
Yeah, it does. Because like you said, I mean, it was totally three different movies, basically. Mm-hmm. I mean, you had the kind of scary, horrific horror part at the beginning, the first 20 minutes, and then you had the meat of the sandwich that was more like a thriller, kind of chasing.
Yeah.
And then you had the ending, which was back to kind of horror, scary.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that any of those three could have kind of existed on their own. But there were some common things running through them, which was the killer, and then the first and last both involved the same the babysitter across time. So
yeah, brought it back together.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, and even though they definitely did have kind of differences as far as the type of horror or the amount of violence involved or the storytelling, there were still some common elements, I think, between all three. And that was definitely the suspense. Like, the whole movie was around milking the suspense. And I think that the way the movie was made supported that pretty well. Like, the way they used the music and the sound and the cameras. And it was like a very subtle, slow build. And I think sometimes, though, like in the second part of the detective scene, they maybe milked that a little too much. Yeah. But it felt like there was always a payoff. And that's one thing I liked about this movie was it made you, like, sit through the build, but it always paid off.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think I think sometimes it would almost be a little bland, so much where like I was on the verge of getting frustrated with it, but then it would, like you kind of said, it would kind of always come back to come back to it. Yeah.
So I guess of the three parts, number one was the long intro with the babysitter in the house who's getting the calls. The second part is just sort of following the detective who is hunting the killer. And then the third part is the killer coming back for revenge on Jill and her family. And I think that part one was my favorite. It didn't have any of my favorite scenes from the movie, but I thought that on the whole, it was just pulled off really well. And just the way that they use the camera panning around the house. And like there's that shot as she's on the phone calling the restaurant, and it's just showing random things inside the house, and then it stops for a second on the front door where you see that the latch isn't locked, and then it just goes to something else and keeps going around. But like I loved that they just sort of subtly worked in that thing where you then have to worry about, is that a problem? Does that mean that someone is inside? Does that mean someone's about to come inside? Like just the way that with no dialogue, no real focus on that from the characters, they were able to create that feeling of tension and suspense just by sort of what they were showing while this sort of dull thing was happening in the background.
So I wondered if the beginning, like if it would have the same effect on younger people who like have like the cell phone with them at all times, and it's like, like so part of the scare at the beginning It's just like, how can the call be coming from, inside the house? Obviously, it's just another line. Nowadays, I mean, if that could be something that's really easily done, as in cell phones,
Sure,
So
yeah.
I think with this, I mean, it's still eerie. I feel like the beginning part
Yeah.
is still eerie, but I think, we kind of grew up. Do you remember hearing the urban legend of the, man upstairs with the babysitter?
No.
I mean, I guess that could also have been a porn, but I just said it wrong. I didn't mean to.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I remember specifically like reading this. It came like through like AOL chat or something.
Yeah.
I don't, something. Reading it and getting like super psyched out, and then it kind of came back to me when I watched it. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is a creepy scene. I think as far as the beginning part goes, like you were saying, when you notice that the door is unlocked and it's going through the scenes, when she's trying to get out of the house, I think that's when like the most anxiety comes.
Oh yeah.
For that scene, because obviously it's supposed to be like that, but just the way they built it up, where like the lights, the door slowly opening, you kind of know where they're at, you kind of don't, and it's just it's intense.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of to your earlier point about would this resonate as well with modern audiences, I remember thinking as I was watching it that if my cell phone was ringing from a number I didn't know, I just wouldn't answer. I mean, but in the 70s, that telephone was your lifeline to the outside world, and when it rang, you answered because you never knew, that may be the only way that someone has to get in touch with you. There was no email or text messages or anything else, and so there's no telling what could be on the other end, so you couldn't afford to just not answer, especially if you were, babysitting someone else's kids.
Yeah, and I think another thing I read that I had trouble noticing it. I didn't know if it was because of the format in which we watched the movie, but they're saying like the rings from the beginning to the end change, where it was like started out like not nearly as loud, I think, or something like that, and then it got louder and louder. And it was kind of like to annoy, I guess kind of annoy the viewer.
Yeah,
the person watching the movie.
It becomes to where you're almost like tensing when it rings, you know.
When I was trying to watch this when Katie was in bed, and like of course like every time the phone rang, like I was like, I know the dogs are gonna start barking, and so I was getting pretty pissed at it. And then I read that and I was like, oh, touche, you fooled me. Yeah.
I also really like the random shots of the outside of the house while she's like on the phone and you're seeing from outside, like kind of through the window or something, because you're just scanning every inch of the screen looking for something, and you don't know if it's going to be inside or outside of the house. And I think in that way it was kind of that really relatable situation where you're in a house feeling vulnerable at night, kind of like The Strangers, where it makes you just feel unsafe in your own home. Yeah. So yeah, overall, I thought that was really good. I thought the ending part, not necessarily the calls are coming from inside the house, because I knew that was coming from that stupid preview from 2006. But to find out that he had been up there and had killed the kids like hours before,
right,
and was still just sitting there like messing with her, that was the part that was like super chilling and creepy.
Yeah, I mean that was the thing too. It was like, it's not like the beginning part had a happy ending, like the kids were killed, and you find out like not only were they killed, they were like torn apart without a weapon, like brutal. Like super dark and brutal. Yeah, it's like, oh god, this is a movie in the 70s, like okay, but it was, I think that made it a little bit more intense, and I think doing that kind of helped with who Duncan ended up, who the killer ended up being. Like, I mean, like, because he didn't necessarily look super like scary. He didn't look like a Michael or Jason. I think that may have helped. Like, oh, this dude's like legit crazy.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and knowing what he was capable of definitely added a lot of subtext to the rest of the movie. Yeah, especially getting into part 2, which was a lot. In my opinion, it was slower just because it was longer. but it was really kind of developing the killer, and instead of building the fear of like being trapped alone in your house, it was more building the fear that the people you meet in a bar or on the street might be insane.
Yeah.
And so that was just a little bit of a different angle. But like I said, it was also the only part of the movie that felt a little slow to me.
I read another thing about this. Well, yeah, another thing about this. I'm kind of done with my facts. It just kind of ties into what I said. So Tony Beckley played Duncan, the crazy killer, and he was like legit sick when that happened. And I think it was like he ended up dying like 6 months after the premiere of the movie.
Oh, wow.
And so that's why like I think they initially were like wanting, they were talking like getting another killer like that looked a little bit more I don't know, crazy, because he was kind of weaker and frail. But I think it was the director was like, no, it stuck with it, and and I guess Beckley appreciated it as long as he did. But yeah, it said he died 6 months later, and I think it was like, I think they said brain tumor, but I also read something where it was said that could have possibly been like the early stages like of AIDS and stuff. It was crazy, but anyway.
Yeah. So but he definitely did look just like another guy that you would pass on the street. Sort of that. And it reminded me, a lot of this part of the movie reminded me of M.
Oh yeah.
Where it's just sort of the killer out there walking among you, and everybody's just oblivious to it.
Well, and they played like with him. I don't think it was a bad call making him like a normal person. I think that was a good call.
Yeah.
And because it almost makes it more scary to me.
Oh yeah.
That like some normal, Joe Schmo off the street, is crazy enough to do something like this.
Yeah.
Like these are the horror movies that I have talked about. Like these are what freaks me out.
Yeah.
Because these are what could happen.
Yeah, you could there is nothing preventing your brain from superimposing you into these situations.
Exactly. Yes, yeah.
And so there was the part about kind of the investigation, and the guy who had been the cop on the initial arrest with the babysitter in part 1 is continuing, to investigate this guy through part 2. And he gets kind of to the end of his rope, and he's at the point that he's going to, like, he's told people, like, I'm not trying to catch the guy, I'm trying to kill him. And so that was sort of interesting, just from the perspective of, like, the cop is turning bad, but you know that the guy's bad, so you're kind of rooting for him to kill because you're mad at the other guy for having killed people. Like, it just kind of creates a weird situation. Well,
you don't know that he escaped, but you don't know if he hasn't been rehabilitated. Like,
and so you don't know if he's still crazy.
Is it this ex-cop, now private eye, that
just making up for his own like career failure or something? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, but it does definitely play like a twist on you, because you start feeling kind of bad for the
Yeah.
And then he starts stalking the other person,
and he was so creepy.
He's very good at it. Yeah, very good at it.
Yeah, like
it reminded me of Psycho.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the name of someone we both knew from Oklahoma, but never mind.
Oh, Russell? Yeah, remind me of Russell.
Oh man, but yes. So this part also had my favorite scene in the movie, and I guess just sort of high level, what happened through here is, he's out on the loose, he finds a lady in a bar and he's hitting on her shamelessly, and then another guy in the bar sees it, and the girl is just not having it, and the other guy in the bar beats him up and then pours wild turkey on him, which was insult to injury. But then he follows the lady home and is follows her into her apartment and is trying to explain himself, and she's kind of like feeling sorry for him, and then tells him to leave, and then he does, and then he's kind of like continuing to follow her, but then the cop is trying to trap him, and he's talking to her, and they figure out that they're going to set this trap for him. And so she leaves the bar alone and is walking home, and the cop's like tailing her to keep an eye out. And then she gets back, and then he meets up with her and is like, well, there's no sign of him, guess he's not coming out tonight. And then she's just there alone in her apartment, and she walks into the kitchen, but the camera stays stationary, and then the closet door opens in the room that she just left, and he was already in there the whole time. Like, damn, that was a good twist. I did not see that coming, and it was just set up and like staged and timed so perfectly. You know, I thought that was just a really, really good scene that was making use of the tools that they had available, which was kind of grainy camera and music, basically.
Right, yeah.
And it was just a really effective horror scene.
To start off that, too, like, when he comes into the woman's apartment at the very beginning, and she finally gets him out, like, kind of shoos him out. I mean, that's really creepy, but she locks the door, and as she's locking the door, he's checking to see
you see the handle turn?
Open.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. That's what was... I was kind of freaked out. I was like, good God almighty, that's like... And she handled it like a champ. Yeah. I would have a gun in my hand extremely fast, probably shooting through the door, just done with it. But yeah, that was like, Jesus, that was a good setup right there.
That's nightmare fuel is what that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and so then, you know, the cop comes back and busts in and the killer runs away, and that's basically the end of part 2.
So are we starting this when the private investigator throws that... I just want to touch base on like him throwing that ninja pin at him and missing. That was a pretty sweet deal. I'm just saying. Like, this guy had a shank.
Yes.
And he tracks him to like this homeless shelter.
Yeah.
Chases him through. Finally gets one up on him and throws what we think is like a knife. It's like a ninja sharp pin thing, sticks in the wall behind the guy. I was just like, that's badass.
Yeah. Yeah.
He doesn't carry a gun with him. He carries those things.
He had called his shot earlier that's how he was going to do it. And,
it was great.
But then I guess what I was thinking more of as part 3 was just like from when you see grown-up Jill.
Yeah, yeah.
So the babysitter is now a grown-up and has kids of her own and is like seems to be successful in business. I forget exactly what she was doing. But then one of the two of them has gotten a promotion, so they're going to go out to dinner and celebrate, and they leave the kids at home with the babysitter. I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say, if I was babysitting in a house as a teenager and 2 kids got murdered, I sure as hell wouldn't leave my own kids alone in a dark room ever.
Yeah, I was thinking this too.
But also, Jill's husband was a dick.
He was like, I'm fixing to eat these stairs. Are you talking about that part?
No, I'm talking about don't ever snap at a waiter.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like, that's such a dick move.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I hated it.
I mean, no. Unless the waiter's being a dick.
But you don't snap.
Oh, I'll snap.
Ugh.
No, I'm just kidding.
I hate it. It just made me uncomfortable to watch it. Anyway.
Like, why could he be the one who died? I'm just kidding.
Right. But then, so they're at dinner, and then Jill gets a call and hears on the other end of the phone, have you checked the children? Obviously, she freaks out, but then goes home, and it turns out the kids are okay. But she's still got a feeling. And I think I would too. I mean, like, you think about 7 years later, all of a sudden the most traumatic experience of your life is being reenacted.
Well, she knows that he's on the loose at this point, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, that would, add that extra, fright. But here's the thing, too. I mean, like, there's 2 ways of thinking about this. It's one, like, how would he be able to find her? I guess a phone book back then. But also, like, don't have your kids sleeping in their own room. Mm-hmm. If someone crazy is on the loose, at least, like...
Yeah. Maybe stay in a hotel.
Oh, yeah, that's a good call. Hotel, or I was going to say just in the same room where everyone has access to the gun.
Yeah. I mean, kids and guns never goes wrong. So...
You trying to take away our Second Amendment right, Daniel?
Only from your children.
This podcast over with?
Hey, let's get back on track here.
Sorry, we'll cut this.
No, I was just snapping at you to show how obnoxious it was.
That's how we snap. It's like, it's funny. Like, our snap is almost an apology too.
Yep.
Because you feel bad about that now, don't you?
Yeah. But yeah, so the anyway, this is.
Are you talking about like actual snapping?
Yeah, like he snapped his fingers.
Oh,
yeah, he's like.
I thought you were referring as in like he snapped as like.
Nah.
Like bad attitude snapped.
No,
I wouldn't snap at it. Yeah, that's my bad.
No, it's all good. But yeah, let's snap back to it. So one thing that I normally get annoyed by in movies is they overdo the fake out scare.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like in like the modern jump scare era of like cheap thrill horror movies, it's now the thing is they'll do a bunch of fake jump scares before they do the real jump scare, and it's just kind of cliche. But in this one, when she's at the house and you already know that the killer's out and he's on the loose and he's messing with her again, and she has reason to be suspicious, and she's going through the house and she notices in the kids' room the closet door is open a little bit, and she walks over and opens it, and there's that build up and it feels really intense, but then it's just nothing and the kids are safe and everything's fine, and you think it's all just him kind of messing with her, like he may not even be in town. And then she goes back to bed, and then it's still bothering her, and she's going to call the detective, and rolls over and realizes the phone line is disconnected. And then she looks back, and her husband rolls over, and it's really the killer. So you had the fake out with the closet, and then the shocker of the rolling over killer. And I thought that was like a nice, like, oh, you're almost like letting you down just to set you up to hit you again. And that was really good.
Yeah, I think the other fake out is that, you know, in the first section of this movie, he got the kids. Mm-hmm. And so, like, you're kind of thinking, like, I kind of thought at that point, you know, it's like, okay, maybe he's messing with, you know, he's in there with the kids again, and, like, it's going to end the same way, you know, basically it started. And then he turns around. Freaked me out, man. Yeah.
But then the detective comes in and gets him just in time. And it's like, I feel like it's a little bit of a redemption story for the detective. Because he's like failed to stop him all these times. And then finally in the end, you know, he doesn't fall for the same trick twice and he gets him. So he was just he was just a real nice older white guy.
Yeah, I just kind of think that like he, you know, it technically did catch him the first time. Just, I mean, not soon enough, but...
Oh, true, yeah.
That wasn't who she was talking to at the beginning. Yeah. And so it's just like, oh, you're, like, obsessed with this. And, yeah, overall, though, man, it's pretty good. I think...
it kept my attention.
Yeah, it definitely did. Mine, too. It wasn't too long, kept your attention. It was... What else could you ask for?
Yeah. Was it, like, off, the audio track, a little bit off for you? With the dialogue?
You know, I didn't notice it.
Okay. And I couldn't tell. It may have just been because it was YouTube and it may have been our internet connection or any number of other things, but there were some parts in the movie where what they were saying didn't line up super well with what was happening on screen. But again, for this type of movie, that wasn't really like a big deal. Like the acting wasn't really the main thing that was carrying it. So
well, yeah, and you know, definitely the way that we watched it, it was on YouTube, it was super grainy and a little difficult to watch it. And really, it was kind of the beginning when it was super dark. That's when I noticed it the most. But I didn't notice the sound off any.
Yeah, and I have that problem on our computer sometimes with just streaming video in general. So
kind of slows down.
Yeah, it's like especially with sports. It's like the audio is off from the video, and I don't know why that is, but anyway. Yeah. But yeah, I was glad to have this to watch because watching the Raiders this past weekend gave me nothing but sadness. And
I know. I was thinking like, oh God, if he after the Raiders, and if this was a bad movie, like I was just like, I don't want to think about it.
Yeah. But as rough as that was, I did get to record with the new band yesterday for the first time.
That's exciting.
Yeah, we should have some new music out here before too long, which is pretty cool. With the last band, the last thing that we recorded never got released, which is like super soul crushing to me because it was so close. But
That's exciting.
Back in the saddle. It feels good.
Hell yeah! You want to know what I got going on?
What do you got going on?
Nothing. I'm on vacation.
Well, that feels good.
Not doing anything.
Yeah. So what exactly do you do on a day off?
Oh, I'll tell you. So, yesterday, woke up. AA goes. Started watching. I watched the Joe Rogan podcast with Rob Zombie.
Oh, yeah.
All day.
Yeah,
Pretty
you
good.
texted me about that, yeah.
And then I watched another show, and I ate lunch. Basically, what I was doing was I was putting off watching this movie until as late as possible. I put it off so... yeah, that's what I do. But when I'm on vacation mode, it for sure happens. And so I put it off until it was super late. And so then today, I watched it, and then today I rewatched it, parts of it, to make sure I had my notes were correct.
Nice.
And I'll just I also work when I'm on vacation, but I had to rewatch it because I have a note in here that said I'd say the first ZOMO''Z is scary. I don't know what I wrote, what that was about. I think I made up a word.
Yeah.
And so I was obviously out of it at this point.
Yeah.
But
well, there you go. Did you see the link I sent you today?
Yes, I did.
I'm kind of excited for that.
Yeah, man, I think it's gonna be pretty good.
So there is a new documentary coming out called Scream Queen: My Nightmare on Elm Street. And it is a documentary about Mark Patton, who starred in that movie, and who we talked about quite a bit in our Nightmare on Elm Street 2 episode from a couple seasons ago. And we had talked about how weird it was, just that movie in general. And you had talked about specifically some of the gay themes and undertones of it, and the controversy around it that a lot of
trying
stuff
to cancel me.
Huh?
I didn't say anything about it.
About the movie? In your facts. Yeah? No, in your facts you were talking about how that was a thing.
I thought you were trying to get me canceled.
I'm not trying to get you canceled.
God dang.
No, but that's a thing that's always been the controversy around that movie, and one of the things that when you were looking at the stuff you read a lot about, which I don't think either of us had really picked up on when we were watching the movie. And so I guess this is sort of him, because Mark Patton retired from Hollywood shortly after that movie because of all the stuff that was going on about it. And so this is kind of him coming back to tell his side. So it should be interesting, just from, know, a movie that we know about that holds a very interesting place in horror movie history.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely interested. I think it's something we should watch and get into. It's just something extra knowledge to learn about horror movies. I kind of realized, after watching the Rob Zombie on Joe Rogan, what it's like to be an actual 100% obsessed with horror movie fan.
Yeah.
Whereas he's just spouting off these random facts about all these movies and stuff like that, and it's just man, that's I want to know more about these movies than what do we do now,
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to cross over into not just the horror movies, but also sort of the culture and stuff around them. So anyway, the more you know.
Well, but overall, with this movie, it was a win for the week.
Yeah.
I think it's...
I guess you could say I really snapped to attention on this one.
You did. I guess we better not snap out of it. Wait.
the movie...
Well, fuck it.
The movie next week may snap us out of any good feelings we have towards the list.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I don't do it if it's provoked, but I let them know, hey,
Yeah.
For the record, I'm not going to do anything about this. I'm just going to subtract 50 cents off the tip.
Yeah, you just have
I'm not going to round it up to the even dollar.
You have a Post-it note, and you're just writing a minus and a number that gets bigger throughout the night. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, like if I need a waiter, I'll just stand up and go talk to him. Like, right. I don't know. He was just kind of a goofball.